Hello, I'm excited to talk to you about our work studying journalist-researcher collaborations on the misinformation beat. This work was done by myself, Martina, Povolo, and Kate Starbird at the University of Washington. Our paper starts by detailing how online journalism has changed the role of all modern journalists, especially specialists or beat journalists. For those new to the topic, a beat refers to a thematic specialization in journalism, and reporters usually cover one or a few beats, which allows them to specialize through developing subject matter knowledge in that area and over time growing trust with their audience. Our previous work in 2019 found that the misinformation beat was uniquely challenging, involving technical, methodological, and ethical considerations. And that's why after our paper was presented in CSCW in 2020, we became interested in how to better serve and support journalists covering this beat. We decided to study collaborations and take an ethnographic approach to researching how they would go. This would allow us to capture journalists' and researchers' perspectives and deepen our understanding of the intersection. We then started constructing these collaborations in 2019, thinking we'd just do a handful with the small number of misinfo journalists out there. And then, 2020 happened. It's no surprise when I say that 2020 saw increased levels of misinformation, disinformation, and conspiracy theories, especially online. From the infodemic to the misinformation around the Black Lives Matter protests and later election misinformation, it was a time of heightened awareness and spreading of bad information online. And this meant that more journalists than ever were getting up to speed on the misinformation beat. And the challenges that were outlined in our first paper were growing, with more journalists needing support. And to be fair, more researchers like us wanted to get early findings into the hands of journalists, all in an effort to educate the public and have broader impacts in a timely manner. Sometimes that meant improving public health outcomes or maintaining trust in democracy. The handful of collaborations that we planned ballooned into 30, which was great for us, maybe not so great as an indicator of the state of the world. And there were three parts to our method. First, collaboration activities, where I took an ethnographic approach to data collection as a participant observer. The collaborations were typically initiated when a journalist reached out to our team, often via email, with a misinformation beat-related question that fell into one or more of the following categories that you see on the left side. Next, after the collaborations were complete, we conducted 14 semi-structured qualitative interviews of all researchers and many journalists who participated in the collaborations. We then transcribed and atomized the interviews. Finally, we integrated data analysis of the collaborations and the interviews, and this all happened virtually on a collaborative Miro board due to the pandemic. Adopting an interpretive and inductive approach informed by Sharmaz and Strauss, we analyzed the data and looked for emerging themes. The findings offer four primary insights. First, we offer a typology of goals that emerged when we analyzed journalists' motivations in reaching out to our team. By defining types of requests, we can better separate the ways that we respond to and solve for the various journalist requests. For example, in the future, we may help journalists with follow-up requests in a different way than those looking for contextual education. Next, we discuss why misinformation beat journalists rely more on researchers compared to other beats. And this is largely for help getting up to speed, accessing data, and gut-checking stories on misinformation. Third, we discuss challenges and professional tensions that emerge from these collaborations. Often for researchers, this meant making ethical decisions on what kinds of data to share with journalists, especially outside of the peer review timeline. And journalists, too, sometimes had a hard time finding harmony between meeting the needs of the business of journalism and using data output from these collaborations. Sometimes the analysis findings just simply weren't newsworthy, which could strain relationships when researchers spent a lot of unpaid time to help. Finally, we transitioned from the whys to share ethnographic insights on the how. How did these collaborations happen? In the analysis, we discovered what we call the challenge of getting on the same page. One of the most salient and challenging issues the researchers discussed was the process of tackling big, bold questions from journalists and translating them into actionable data questions that the researchers could answer. An example might be a question from a journalist: how much misinformation is on Twitter now compared to before the 2020 election? These kinds of questions elicited conversations between journalists and researchers about data access, data analysis, and assumptions, as well as education on why these kinds of questions can't be easily answered. In short, these broad questions often necessitated a great deal of methodological and contextual onboarding, or getting on the same page, that researchers found to be cumbersome over time. To tie it all together, researchers felt like they were having to help this influx of new misinformation beat reporters specialize quickly. Again, this is something that they were happy to do, but it felt unsustainable, and that there were other ethical challenges they were encountering in doing the work. You can read more about the findings in the paper, but I want to briefly highlight some of our discussion items to perhaps entice you to take a better look at the paper. Looking at the big picture, we set out to better understand how researchers could aid journalists on this beat, and our findings do cover that context. But the most salient themes that emerge actually highlighted the researchers and their emerging role as a data mediator between social media platforms and journalists, and by extension, the public. And left without guidance on how to handle these situations at speed, most of the researchers we spoke to felt moments of hesitation, caginess, and uncertainty about the role that they were filling. And this role of academics as data mediators is increasing, and is something that we in the discussion call for SIGCHI researchers to tend to. This role is being enacted through these collaborations, which have continued, but also as data transparency initiatives are institutionalized, like the Aspen Commission on Information Disorder, which called for, among other things, platforms to disclose public interest data to qualified researchers. Because of this, our paper ends with two focuses. First, a call to action. We call for social computing researchers within the CHI community and beyond to develop ethical frameworks that consider these gray areas of misinformation work at speed and nuances around user privacy with respect to misinformation. So specifically, how to ensure methodological soundness at speed, developing alternatives to peer review at speed, and building on other privacy work like that of Fiesler to consider nuances of anonymization in data sharing with outside parties like journalists. Finally, we provide practical guidance for you if you find yourself in the role of a data mediator on how to handle some of these requests. I hope you have time to read our paper, and we're now happy to answer any questions.